all that I thought was lost when I lost Jacques. And so the book is just the story of my life with Jacques, losing him, my personal journey with grief, and then finding my way back to happiness and learning how to live with grief on a daily basis.
Fantastic. Char Westfall with us today, A Beautiful Tragedy. Dawn, do you have any questions for our guest?
Well, a lot of them. One of the things I noticed, do you live in Jacksonville?
I do. Jacksonville, well, just south of Jacksonville, Florida.
No, because I'm in Jacksonville now, and I just saw the 904 number. But
Yeah.
that's so. If I heard you correctly, you lost your first husband in that SEAL tragedy, and then remarried and had some things happen. Could you kind of give us a feel for some of those things and how you managed to work your way out, which is always a good thing for all of us to learn, because courage is what we all need.
Yes, so when I lost Jacques, obviously it was, for me, being 29 years old, it was the worst day of my life, and I hit probably my lowest of lows that I could have ever imagined in my life, and I was angry and just thought my whole future was gone. And here I went from being a young wife and happily married into having everything taken away, not having kids yet. I'd always wanted to be a mom, and so I just didn't know where I would go from there. And so in the book, I talk about how the anger just kind of took me over in that first year. And not that I made any decisions or choices that I'm embarrassed of, but I just knew that I wasn't handling it well. I just kept pushing everything down, trying to make everyone think I was okay, to try to make myself think I was okay. And so the first year and two were quite a challenge for me. It wasn't until I just had a big explosive blow up one day in front of my parents and my now husband, we were just friends at the time, that I just kind of looked at myself and said, you need help and you need to go seek counseling. And I did, and I had kind of pushed that aside because I thought that counseling was just when you couldn't accept something. And I was like, I know he's gone. I know he's not coming back. What are they going to do for me that I don't already know? And I couldn't have been, more wrong about what counseling was. It really helped me work through my emotions and my feelings, and knowing, that the anger was okay and all that was okay. And so through the help of my, now husband, like I said, he was a friend back then, and the church and counseling, I was able to just start living again and finding happiness and being okay with being happy. I felt like if I was happy, then I wasn't still mourning Jacques, even though I was. And it's just was all about learning how to deal with my grief, but still learning to live. Because I just honestly believe that the true way to honor your loved one's loss, especially Jacques being a hero for our country and dying the way he did, I didn't want to be an embarrassment to his name. And so I have learned that living my life to the fullest and giving back to different organizations and continuing to be who I am was the best way to honor him and the relationship that we once had.
Well, we all hopefully honor them. Was the Navy helpful in eventually? I know Navy wives usually are very supportive of each other, but what was your experience with the Navy wives, etc., and your fellow SEAL wives?
Well, so the Operation Red Wings, that mission, losing 19 total, 11 SEALs, was the biggest loss at one time that the SEALs have had since the Vietnam War. So at that time, there wasn't a lot of support for us. There was maybe 3 other SEAL widows, and so we were a very small group, and we were just kind of trying to figure it out on our own. The command tried to be as helpful as they could, but they really didn't have a lot in to offer us at the time. And so we really kind of just did it on our own. thankfully, since then, they have developed quite a few different programs to help the surviving families and the active duty families, which I think is important too. But they have gone as far as holding 2 retreats a year for us widows to be able to get together, which is especially helpful for someone like me who no longer lives in and around the SEAL communities. And so even though I have friends here in Jacksonville and a great life, it's still nice to be able to go and connect with people who completely understand the journey that I have had and what has happened to me. And then I still have my close girlfriends that I had back then, which is amazing because I wasn't probably the easiest of people to continue to be friends with afterwards. I think that's something else I talk about in the book, just how I just didn't know how to be. I mean, one day I could be angry at them for talking to me about their husbands, and the next day I was angry at them for not being truthful and just treating me like they used to. And so there's just so much that you have to learn and navigate as you go through that. But yes, thankfully I personally had a great support group around me and still do to this day.
You know, we often say survivors are angry because our loved ones have gone on before us. Did you feel that way, or did you feel that abandoned?
So in the beginning, I didn't think I was angry at Jacques. I thought I was just angry at everything that I lost and the pain. And then when I was in counseling, I remember the counselor saying, "Have you written your letter to Jacques expressing to him how angry you are at him?" And I was like, I'm not angry at him. How could I be angry at him? He loved me. He loved his country. He loved the job that he was doing. He died a hero. And as we talked about it, I realized that I was angry at him because as much as he always put me first, being in the military or a first responder or anything of that nature, when you are doing your job is first. I mean, you do not have control over when you're leaving and how you do that job. And so I did realize that there was a part of me that said, why did you make this choice to do this job? Because it then took you away from me. And so once I was able to acknowledge that and work through that, now there's just nothing but pride. I mean, there's still questions of why it happened to me, but being a Christian, I know that there's no answer to that, and even if I had the answer, I probably still wouldn't understand that completely, and so it's just something that I choose to just accept because it is what it is, and I can't, if I dwell on it and let this horrible thing define me, I don't believe that I would be the healthy, happy person I am today.
Well, we're all glad to hear that, but if you had to give a survivor one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
If you had to give a survivor a piece of advice, what single piece of advice would you give?
Okay. I would say that the biggest piece of advice is to seek counseling sooner than later. Even if you don't think you need it, there will come a time that you do, and not because I think that everyone's going to make bad choices, but I feel it's important to be able to express and work through your feelings and your mood changes, and just to be heard, and maybe even get some coping skills on when this happens, try and do this versus just trying to handle it on your own. Because I did that, and like I said, I didn't do anything drastic. I didn't do anything I'm embarrassed of, but I definitely, the anger just kind of started seeping in because I didn't know how to direct different feelings and how to be honest with others, and realize that it wasn't my job to make other people, not feel awkward around me.
IQ question?
I don't know if IQ is with us. He was there and then he dropped out. We have got Char Westfall with us today. She is the author of Beautiful Tragedy, a Navy SEAL Widow's Permission to Grieve, and a Prescription for Hope. So So, Char, this book is incredibly well written. You've put a lot of time and energy into this. What's been some feedback you've gotten on this book?
Well, we're still waiting for the actual release date, but those who have read it have said, I just love seeing this perspective. We see a lot of just the missions. Here we hear a lot from the SEALs, and we have yet to hear from the other side, and just getting to know the men and the relationships, and then that walk that a military wife has to go through, if they lose their spouse. And so that was, besides it being therapy for me, I've heard that it's been helpful to other people as well, just to kind of see an outsider's look into our journey and, the ups and downs that we go through during the, losing somebody.
We have got Char Westfall with us today, a beautiful tragedy. Dawn, she's got a...
How did you come up with the title? Which is a great title, by the way.
Thank you very much. I threw a couple different ideas around, and this one was the one that stuck because it was a tragedy, and normally when you think of tragedy, you wouldn't think of it as being beautiful. But the way that I have been able to come through it and acknowledge the struggles that I had, and to now have found somebody who accepts me, accepts my past, honors my first husband, and I've been able to, to remarry and have a family. That is the beauty in what I've gone through, and so that's where we came up with a beautiful tragedy.
Well, some people will argue that if you remarry, you're almost betraying your first husband. I don't hold to that. But what do you say to that?
I'd say that they haven't walked in my shoes. I was judged a lot of us, I should say, almost every widow or widower. I mean, people have an opinion on if you start dating again, how soon you date, if you remarry. And I don't believe as humans we are supposed to go through life alone, if that is, especially if it's not your personality type. And like I said, I had always wanted to be married, always wanted to be a wife, wanted to be a mom. And when I lost Jacques, it was just, I thought I just wanted to go as well. And so for someone, I was judged, and someone said, well, she should stay single for 10 years because she was with him for 10 years. And I was like, well, I'm 29. That puts me at 39 to start even looking to date. What does that do for me having children? And people who not necessarily walked in my shoes. And so I find it important to be able to still honor Jacques. I remember him. He's not just put on a shelf somewhere. He's talked about. I'm still extremely close with his side of the family. And so he's not forgotten in my heart. I haven't moved on. I've moved forward is what I like to say.
That's a great line. Don't you agree, Jiggy?
Oh yeah, you have got a great story here, a great book. What's been, I guess, what was the hardest part of writing the book?
The hardest part was I had a friend who kind of helped me in the beginning. There were some people that I wanted to hear their side of how they experienced and watched me go through this. And I told her, I was like, I can't talk to them. I know enough already that I don't want to hear it from them. So going back through and then having to edit all of this time and time again, and to constantly read the different things that they were saying and their feelings can still choke me up today, because it's just thinking of my brother's reaction and my sister's reaction and my parents and all of that. And so that was probably the hardest, having to relive things that I didn't ever want to. I mean, I think about them, but those are ones that I try not to think about daily. So that definitely was the hardest part, having to read them over and over again to make sure the edits were staying how I wanted it to be.
Did anybody disappoint you in their support for you?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, just I had one really close friend that when I started dating my now husband, she just couldn't accept him for whatever reason, and that has that hurt me. But I can't fault her. That's just how she dealt with it, and so I don't know if it's so much as disappointment as just hurt to lose that friendship, but I've just accepted that. That's part of life. Not, there's people who are in your life for a reason or for a season, and you have some friends that stay forever and some friends that come and go. And so I've just had to let that go, unfortunately, which is not my personality. I don't like to lose friends. I cherish all my friendships and my family, and so that was hard, but it wasn't healthy for me or my current marriage to keep chasing after that friendship.
How old are your children now?
So my youngest just turned 6 yesterday. So I have a boy, girl, boy. So my oldest is 11, starting 6th grade. I have an 8-year-old daughter going into 3rd, and then my 6-year-old will start 1st grade in a couple weeks as soon as school starts.
Do you ever talk to them about your first husband?
My 2 oldest ones, no. My oldest has been to every December for the last, I would say, 7 to 8 years. I go up for the laying of the wreaths in Arlington around Christmas time. And so for the past, I believe it's been 4 years, my oldest has gone. And so he has known, and then we did tell my daughter about it last year. At that point, she was 7 and thought that was the time to explain to her, that I'd been married before. It's kind of tricky trying to, navigate at what point they can understand. Because even when we first told my oldest, I remember him saying, okay, so then Mr. Jacques was my dad. And we're like, no, he passed away long before I even thought about, or I wanted to have you, but I didn't have him with you. So no, your dad is your dad. And so they ask questions, and my 2 oldest know, and our youngest, when we feel the time is right for him, he will know as well. But they see Jacques' side of the family at least once a year, and call them aunt and uncle, and refer to their cousins, my nieces and nephews as their cousins. So I just love that, because not many surviving families are able to continue to have a relationship, and I just am so grateful that we have been able to.
So you have this feedback, you have the book out now. Well, what's your next step? Do you want to go out and talk more about it? Or what do you hope to accomplish beyond writing the book?
Beyond writing the book, I am open to speaking engagements if they come. If not, so be it. I'm just pretty much leaving it in God's hands. Writing the book was therapy for me, and my hope was that it would help others, even if it was one person, to either find their way through their grief journey or to shed light on how someone's family member or friend is experiencing their grief, to just give advice. And so I'm just kind of letting it all play out, and I'm not opposed to speaking and talking about it and sharing my story for as long as people want to hear about it.
It's interesting. We all handle our grief in different ways, and but it seems that you've done a very great job, not only of handling it, but of helping others. How do you feel about
How does my husband feel about it?
it? How do you feel about sharing it? Has it helped you more?
Oh, okay. Yes, there's times where it's hard, but I feel like each time it helps me just a little more. I don't feel like I'm ever going to get over his loss, but I think the more I can share and know that, my story might help somebody else feel a little bit more normal as they're going through their grief, then it's worth sharing and it's worth experiencing that, moment of sadness or that hard time, if it helps them.
Well, you brought up the point. How does your husband feel about all this? Has he been supportive in what you've been trying to do?
Absolutely. He was actually my biggest encourager in writing it. A friend of mine had said, you should write a book. You're a success story. You have pulled yourself up from the lowest low and continue to live and shine and talk to people about and share your story. And so why don't you just actually put it down on paper? And so he was like, you definitely should. You live to help others. And so if you can help others by writing about it and reaching more people, then you should. He's extremely supportive of that. He's extremely supportive of honoring Jacques in every way he can. He has embraced Jacques' family as they have embraced him, and so I couldn't ask for, a better sense of support in a husband. He's not threatened by Jacques. Instead, he just, embraces what it was, and him being a hero in that sense.
The name of your book again and how people can get it? I'm taking Jiggy's line, but I know I want to read it.
It can be pre-ordered right now on Amazon, or if people want a signed or personalized copy, you can go to ballastbooks.com, and we'll be able to get them out that way as well.
Fantastic. We have got Char Westfall with us today, A Beautiful Tragedy. She joins us today here on our broadcast. Also, Don Mazzella is with us, our co-host each and every week. And so Char, has anybody that's been involved in the military or a military wives or anybody like that, have they reached out to you about the book or talked to you about the book at all?
They have. I've done a couple podcasts when the book was getting ready to be released and went up for pre-order, and I have had quite a few military spouses reach out to me and ask me questions about how did you deal with the constant traveling and how did you support him, and so I've been contacted and spoken with one group that is just military wives. Their podcast have been asked to come out and speak to their group once they get back to meetings, and so I love it because that was my point in sharing it, is that if people had questions or wanted to talk to me about it, I was there, and so I've been excited to see just complete strangers reaching out to me.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. I'm glad that you're getting I guess the community to reach out to you on this. Are you planning on writing a follow-up or doing anything more with this?
That is to be determined. When I was sending it off the day that it was headed off to the printers, I talked to my editor and I said, "Oh, I really wish I would have added this and this," and he said, "Okay, so are we pulling it back or are we going? It's up to you." And I was like, "Oh no, just send it." He goes, "Well, maybe that's book 2. That's it, So I don't know. We'll see how it goes with this one and where we go from here. I haven't quite made that decision yet.
Who's your publisher?
Ballast Books. They're out of Washington, D.C. He is an author and then decided to start his own publishing company.
Wow. So, this.
How did you?
Yes, go ahead, Don.
Find him?
He contacted the LUTTRELL. So Marcus Luttrell is the lone survivor from the mission that my husband was killed on, and I don't know how he knew about Melanie or had met them before. And she said, my friend Char, who is a surviving spouse, had written a book and was talking about sharing it, and maybe you would be interested in talking with her and seeing if this was a project that the two of you would like to do. And he said absolutely, and so she introduced us, and we just went with it from there.
No, it's very unusual to be able to get a publisher like that. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure your book's going to be successful. There's no question.
Thank you. Yes, I had tried to go a different route before when I first wrote it, and it even went as far as to an editorial review board at one point. But this was back, it was 4 years ago, and they just wanted more about the SEALs and their missions. And I said, I respect that, and I understand that that is what most people want to read, but I am not Jacques. I was not a SEAL, and that was his job. And as much as I respected him and admired him for it, I never pretended that that was me. So I said, I'm not going to include his missions. I don't even know a lot about them. It's just my side of the story. And so I just kept it that way. And so, yeah, back then it was, I just kind of put it on a shelf and figured it was done. And then I get approached by Andy with Ballast Books, and I just was like, okay, I guess this is it. This is the time. We're going to do this.
We've got Char Westfall with us today, A Beautiful Tragedy. She is a fantastic, fantastic author. She joins us today here on our broadcast. And so, Char, talk to me about the cover of this book. It's very interesting. Tell me about it.
Well, I wanted a picture of Jacques. I wanted people to see his face. I wanted people to put a face to his name. But I'm also extremely patriotic, as was he. And so I just loved the subtleness of his picture. It's one of my favorite pictures of him on this last deployment that he was on. I love the subtleness of the flag, and so we did a lot of back and forth with the designer, and that's just the one we came up with. I thought it was the most fitting for what I was envisioning the cover to look like.
Fantastic. What's it look like, Jiggy? I didn't see the cover.
It's a very interesting cover. Kind of describe it for the radio audience here, Char, since you're the author.
So there's this picture of him on deployment. Somebody was up above him, I guess up on a building or maybe a truck, I'm not really sure, and they called his name, and it's just one of his perfect looks as far as like, what do you want? Like, what is going on now? And he just kind of looking over his shoulder, looking up at them, and just in full gear. But you can see his eyes. There's so many of his pictures over there that he's got a baseball cap on and sunglasses. And so I love that you can just see his eyes and see his face. And then it's just the blue with a very subtle American flag across it as well. The sand from being in Afghanistan, I just wanted to incorporate everything about him and his job, but also just let you see a little bit of, really who he was, and not just the SEAL that he was. But I think you can see that in his face, and so that's pretty much what it is.
Well, you definitely have a great book here. You mentioned that you're very patriotic. What do you think of some of the different things going on in the world around us?
It makes me sad. I think that as much as I don't want to say it, I believe that our country is based on freedom, and so if they have a different view than me, they're welcome to it. I personally will never kneel for the flag. The flag was draped over my husband's coffin, folded up and handed to me, and as it was handed to me, they told me that this flag represents the country that your husband died protecting. And so for that reason alone, I personally would never kneel during the national anthem or for the flag. I hope and pray that this country can come together with some sort of unity. I don't necessarily believe that everybody has to feel one way or the other, and if you don't feel a certain way, then that makes you less of a person or less compassionate towards others. So I personally don't believe that kneeling for the flag is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
We have got Char Westfall with us today. A beautiful tragedy. So this book, what was the writing process like? What's some of the research that you did for the book, and just putting this whole thing together?
So a friend of mine worked on it with me. She interviewed my parents, my siblings, and then one of my close friends' husbands who was with me a lot during the beginning when we were notified, and going forward with that, just as he had to be by my side for a lot of it. And so she did that. Then a lot of it was just my personal story. I mean, it was how we met, our journey, and then just me. So it was pretty much the two of us just putting our thoughts and the stories down on paper, and working on it to make it one big story. And then from there, I've worked with the editors over at Ballast to just kind of get it to where it needed to be for publishing.
That's fantastic. So
I also wanted to go out and buy it.
So did you have much of I guess when you put this together, as far as editing, did you have anybody over you saying you can't include this, you can't include that, things like that, or was that not at all part of it? Because we've talked to authors before where they're like, well, I really wanted to put this in, but my editor was like, nope.
No, thankfully, Ballast Books, they are a type of a hybrid publishing company, so they really go with what you want to do with your book. And so I was very blessed and thankful in that regard. They would make suggestions. I did have the copywriter come back and say, you really should think about including more information about the mission. And I talked with my personal editor, and I said, listen, I just don't feel comfortable with that. The SEALs are very private. I have a lot of friends that are still active. And like I said before, I'm not a SEAL. I wasn't a SEAL. And so I'm not going to pretend that I knew about his missions and his day-to-day life, the work. And so I really want to just stay true to what I know, and it being my story, and he fully supported me on that. And so I was thankful for that. There was no real push on add more of this, of the mission and the work side for the SEALs.
Jiggy, I have to tell you, you sound like one of the most level-headed people we've had on this program in a while. Don't you agree?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so
much.
We've had over the last last couple weeks we've had some interesting folks come through here. We had
what I mean by that, the way you came about deciding on the book as an author, I have to tell you, you make a lot of sense, particularly with your idea that you're not talking about the mission, you're talking about life after that mission and the effect of that mission. And I think sticking to it was a very smart move on your part.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was very, stood my ground on that, and I was thankful that they respected that decision that I had made.
Well, I think in the long run, you're going to have a book that's going to last a lot longer. I'm going to ask you a question, but, deployment, particularly SEALs and other, they're there and you're here. How do the deployments affect you? You in fact don't know what's going on. And that's sometimes harder than being there and knowing what's going on. But how did it affect you?
So I do better the more information I have. And so it wasn't always easy for me. And so I just had to rely on him to tell me what he could and trust him in the sense that if he wasn't telling me everything, it wasn't because he was keeping something from me. It was because he was honoring his job and what they asked him to do. And so as hard as that was for me not to know every little thing, I knew that it was best for us in our marriage if I could just trust him to tell me what he could, and trust him that, what he didn't tell me was not because he was trying to be secretive or to not be a good husband or not be honest with me, but it was because that is what was required of him, in his job.
Yeah, if I heard you correctly, you got married at 19. How long did you know him beforehand?
Yeah, so I met him when I was 20, and then we got married. Let me say, I was 24. Yeah, I guess I was 19 or 20. Got married at 24, and then lost him when I was 29. And he was about 7.5, 8 years older than me. And so my dad was Navy, and so in the beginning he was like, "Oh, I'm not really comfortable." He not really. He wasn't comfortable. Neither one of my parents were, just being young and still being in college. But thankfully we were able to get through that and over that, and it served to be a great relationship and great choice in marriage, and up until we lost him, unfortunately.
Well, how did you meet him?
I was home for the summer. So my dad was retired Navy, and so obviously we still had access to the naval base. He had served 20 years, and so when I would come home from college over the summer, I was a lifeguard at the Navy base on top of being a swim coach out in town. And so he was a rescue swimmer instructor at the time. He was not a SEAL when I met him. So we crossed paths. He would lifeguard every once in a while to just kill time. He lived about 40 minutes away from where he worked, and so just to help let the traffic go, he would stay behind sometimes and lifeguard, and so our paths crossed that way.
And he just happens to stay behind for the traffic.
Yeah. Yes.
Boy,
Yeah.
boy, I could sell a bridge to Brooklyn to you.
Yeah, I talk about how I tried to make sure I got his attention in the book.
That's awesome. So, so you put a lot of time and effort into the book. You've gotten a lot of great feedback on this. What are some of your goals for this book?
Pardon?
What are some of your goals for the book?
Oh, you keep cutting out. I'm so sorry.
What are some of your goals? What are you hoping to accomplish with the book?
Okay. My goal, first and foremost, is that if it helps one other person. I know that everybody's grief journey is different, but I do believe that a lot of us share some of the same thoughts and the same, not so much, path, but we go through a lot of the same things. And so I'm hoping that somebody else reads it and say, "Oh, okay, I'm not the only one that feels this way. I'm not crazy for thinking that I just want this all to go away, and I just want to go away." That it's okay to be sad, it's okay to have these feelings, but that you also need to make a choice to keep living. It's not okay to dwell on them and let them consume you and define you. And so that is one of my goals. The other goal is that it helps friends and family members to better support their friend or family member who is going through grief. Like I said, for me, I just was so wanted everybody to feel comfortable and everybody to think that I was okay. And I felt like I was a burden if I would call and cry to them after, like, oh, okay, it's been 2 months. I can't keep calling my friend and crying. She has a life. She's pregnant. She has a husband. Like, how is this affecting her? And so my hope is that it shows that to just be more honest with each other, and that the more honest you are, the better you can be a support to that person as well. And so those were my main two goals, as far and as well as like sharing my struggle with faith. I know not everybody is a Christian, not everybody has faith, but I also think that those who do and who experience grief can kind of see the struggle I went through, and to know that it's okay to have the anger towards God and to have the questions, and that you can still come back from that. So those were, I would say, my three biggest goals in writing and sharing my story.
I think you succeeded.
Pardon?
I think you succeeded. If your book is anything like you, it should, you succeeded. You certainly look at it. Talk as if you, and I think the book probably reflects your voice. So I, for one, am really looking forward to reading it. Grief is a very difficult thing. It's, what do we say, one of the most difficult things to deal with in life? Grief from a loss of a loved one. And what you're saying, everything you said so far, no one could argue with.
Well, thank you, and that's my point. I mean, I saw both my grandmothers. My Nana was a widow from before I was even born, and she never remarried, and I just watched her go through life, and she lived another 60 years alone, and she wasn't unhappy, but that was the choice she made. And see my grandma widowed when I was younger, and to always remember my grandpa, but to find love and companionship other places. And so I think it's just important to embrace it, regardless of what choice you make in moving forward. If you do experience a loss like this, especially for people who are younger, I think it's a lot of stereotypes and a lot of judgments on what you should do, and I just don't think that that's fair to put those on to somebody who has lost a spouse or a child or anything like that.
Well, let me turn it around for a moment. My mother had a wonderful expression when she used to say he was crying with one eye while he was looking around for his next wife with the other eye. But sometimes you see people starting to date 2 or 3 months afterwards and marrying. Do you think that you would have made a good marriage if you had done it quickly?
I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on how if they're getting any sort of counseling. I think that it's hard to judge anybody and not knowing exactly their path of what they've walked through and experienced. I've seen people start dating sooner than others, and they've worked, and I've seen people who have waited long periods of time and still are struggling, trying to find somebody new. So I think it all depends on the person, but most of all, I think you just need to be healthy before you can start looking for that relationship. I don't think you can actually have something that will last and be healthy if you yourself haven't sought help or aren't getting help at the time.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
Well,
What about you, Jiggy?
Well, I'll tell you, this book is pretty fantastic. Our guest is pretty fantastic.
Well, you don't send it to me. You should have sent it to me beforehand. I think I would have really enjoyed it.
Well, Char, what do you make of the uphill struggle that the president has with some of this stuff with Biden and all these protests and all this stuff?
I really feel for him. I don't think any of us would want his job right now, whether you are for him or against him. Again, I think until you are in his shoes, it is easier to be the outsider looking in and have your opinions and your criticism of what he's doing. I personally pray for him and our leaders every morning and every night, because I don't think they have an easy job right now between the COVID-19 and the riots and the protests. I think this country just has a lot going on, and there's a lot for our leaders and our president to be dealing with right now, for sure.
Well, you should run for office.
I say that sometimes, and my husband goes, Char, they would listen to you for 30 seconds and hear like how strongly opinionated you are on certain things, and you would be shot out the door.
You've hit it square. I don't think anybody will want the job right now, including Mr. Biden. It's just, but somebody's got to do it. And I happen to think Mr. Trump is doing a fairly decent job.
I think so too.
Well, at least it makes three people that agree on it. I'm assuming you do too, Jiggy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Char Westfall with us today, A Beautiful Tragedy. Did you have a particular writing style when you went to go put this book together?
We just tried to just keep it in my tone. I wanted it to be as real as it could be, which sometimes I'm reading back and I was like, oh goodness, do I really sound like that? But I just wanted it to be real. I wanted it to be who I am and not try to make it more than what it was. And so that was just my goal, to just keep it from my perspective, in how I would talk, in how I would think. And so that was the goal, and hopefully I accomplished that. And I'm sure there'll be some people who don't care for it. I know that that's just life. But if it helps at least, a couple people, then it was worth it, and I'll take the critics with the compliments.
It's fantastic. Well, if people want to find you online or pick up your book, how do they do that, Char?
You can find me on Instagram at Char Westfall. It's Char with a C. And then I'm also, you can find the book on Amazon, pre-order, or if you want a signed copy, Ballast Books, BALLAST books.com. Can get you an autographed copy that way. And also trying to start this tweeting thing. I don't know a lot about it. I'm a little behind with tweeting, but I've been told that I should get more involved with that. So Char Westfall is the way to find me on most social media.
Fantastic. Well, Dawn, before we wrap up here with you, talk to us about what's going on with you, my friend.
Well, I first want to say, I just came across the wire. Trump cancels GOP convention events in Jacksonville, Florida. So I wouldn't mind. My apartment is right up where he's going to talk, but I guess he's not coming. But anyway, I hope I didn't have anything to do with that. But anyway, the National Robotics Education Foundation, the-nref.org, 2SB Digest, and hashtag 2SB Digest. And my book is coming along. And what can I say? You had a great guest today, Jiggy, and thank you.
Yes, Char, you have been amazing. We appreciate you making as much time as you did for us today, and good luck with the book. And Dawn, we'll talk to you next week. Thank you, my friend.
Look forward to it.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
There they go. Char Westfall, and, of course...